making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a hadith that talks about the state of Jibreel alayhi salam, of this archangel that descends on this night to be with angels, and he is mentioned specifically out of honor and respect for this great angel Jibreel alayhi salam. And the other angels are happy on this night, and they descend in large numbers. They're happy because of what the Muslims are doing, what the believers are doing. On the other hand, think about Iblis, Satan. The hadith describes Satan on the day of Arafat, that he is most debased, most ashamed on the day of Arafat because of what the pilgrims are doing on the plains of Arafat, worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And opposite to that now, the angels and their state of happiness and joy because of what the believers are doing. The scholars have mentioned, Imam Razi radiallahu anhu, this great commentator of the Qur'an, talks about the story of the beginning of the creation of Adam alayhi salam, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decided to create man. And in the Qur'an it is stated that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that he was going to create humankind, Adam alayhi salam, to be placed, and the children of Adam to be placed on this earth, the angel said, "Oh Allah, why would you want to create Adam when they would cause corruption and mischief on this earth? And we are worshipping you, we are honoring you." This was the concern of the angels, because they only wanted the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to worship Allah and to obey Allah. And they knew that humanity would do otherwise. Now this was their perception of what human creation would do. And that's how their relationship with human creation started, of this anxiety on their part, of what human creation would do, disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and cause evil and corruption and bloodshed on this earth. But now, look at what the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has done. Following the example of the beloved of Allah, the blessed Prophet of Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that before the angels didn't want to do anything with the human creation because of what they would do in disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now, on this night of power, Laylatul Qadr, they want to come down on this earth and be with that same human creation, the followers of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because this Ummah of Rasulullah is a special Ummah, the special believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so they are now happy to be with the believers. And Imam Muslim says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has groups of angels that roam the face of this earth, looking for the believers who engage in the remembrance of Allah, in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when they find them, they go and they sit down with them, they join their company, they join their gathering, they join that halakah to dhikr. And they call out to the other angels, come to what you're looking for, come and join us. This is what they say. And so, تَنَزَّلُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَالرُّوحُ فِيهَا. The angels descend on this night to be with the believers in honor of this night, to celebrate this momentous occasion, the beginning of the revelation of the Qur'an, or the revelation of the Qur'an from the Lawh al-Mahfuz to the Baytul Izzah, and from there to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam over a period of time. It started on this night of power, Laylatul Qadr. The angels celebrate this, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They celebrate the great events that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy with. وَذَكِّرْهُمْ بِأَيَّامِ اللَّهِ. The special days of Allah, the special events that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made sacred, the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, celebrate that. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the surah, تَنَزَّلُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَالرُّوحُ فِيهَا بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِمْ مِنْ كُلِّ أَمْرٍ سَلَامٍ. And they do this by the permission of Allah. And they can only do things by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the nature of the angels. لَا يَعْصُونَ اللَّهَ مَا أَمَرَهُمْ وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. They would never disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they only do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands them to do. This is the nature of the creation of the angels. The angels that are created from light, from nur. It's a different creation than human creation or the jinns. The way that human beings are created from earth, from dust, that human creation has the choice whether they want to obey Allah or whether they want to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why there is accountability that comes into that relationship now, because we exercise the choice. But the angels don't have that choice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them that they would only obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they come down with the permission of Allah. And they come with all the affairs and decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِمْ مِنْ كُلِّ أَمْرٍ. مِنْ كُلِّ أَمْرٍ. All the affairs of the next year are decided on this night of power, Laylatul Qadr. Who will live? Who will die? Who will be happy? Who will be sad? Who would get the risk of Allah, and what of the risk of Allah they would get? And all the details that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to decide, it is decreed on this night. Now the scholars have mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Alim. He is the all-knowing one. He knows everything. He knows about all of these decrees even before it was recorded in Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, this preserved tablet that has the records of everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. Before it happened and after it happened, and if it happened or if it didn't happen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. His knowledge is not contingent on any factor, on any condition, on any consideration. It is free from that. And so are all His attributes. Not conditional on anything. Free from any limitations, any human limitations. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Khaliq, the creator. But He was Al-Khaliq, the creator, before He created anything. And after creation is no longer exists, He is still a creator. He doesn't need to create anything in order to be the creator, or in order to be described with the attribute of creator, Al-Khaliq. This is the nature of the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The divine essence, the divine nature that we need to be mindful of. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Al-Alim. He knows everything. But with respect to the decrees now, for the next year, it is revealed from Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz and given to the angels to be recorded of what would happen. That is what is meant. It doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides it then and now. Everything is decided before, from the very beginning, by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِمْ مِنْ كُلِّ أَمْرٍ. مِنْ كُلِّ أَمْرٍ. All the affairs are decided for the next year, from this Laylatul Qadr to the next Laylatul Qadr. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, Salamun hiya hatta matla'il fajr. Peace it is until the break of dawn.